What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another video today. And in this video, we're going to be reflecting back on the COVID-19 pandemic and how it has changed me as a whole. So this is very much a different topic than what I would normally do, but because we are at 5 years since the COVID-19 pandemic started and changed the world as we know it, I think it's appropriate for us to take a look back and see how we've changed as a whole. And joining me in today's video is going to be the wonderful CM Aviation. Mr. Connor, thank you so much for coming on to this video. How are you doing today?
Doing fantastic, man. How's it going over your way?
Doing great over here. It's kind of crazy when you brought this up to me because it's already been 5 years since this whole thing started.
Yes, sir, it has.
It just kind of bamboozled me. It's like, goodness me, it's been 5 years since we had that whole pandemic and everything. But yeah, so just like what we did in part one, we'll take a look back at my YouTube channel specifically and just kind of go through all the content that I've uploaded in that time, like right before COVID hit and then when COVID hit and then in the time afterwards. So if you don't mind scrolling up a little bit, I think you're
probably going to want to be about right here.
Yeah, or actually, no, back down because you have it sorted by newest on the top.
Correct.
So, yeah, a little down to about the end of 2019.
That's going to be about, this is where I was right here.
Yeah, so like right about there. So there we go. And yeah, so this is where we'll start for our chronological timeline for all of this. But for me personally, on my YouTube page, prior to 2020 rather, I didn't have a consistent upload schedule. I didn't have any airport updates or anything of that nature. I had tried experimenting with it in the past, but I just never really liked how it turned out. So really, the only content you saw on my YouTube was plane spotting and the occasional model unboxing. That's it. I had no airport updates, no consistency. And, the only unique videos that I would have on the channel, I'm just looking back on my computer, I had a video on the solar eclipse of 2017. That was fun. And then the DSLR came into play in 2018. Air Force One, all the fun stuff that came that year. 2018 was really good for plane spotting. And then 2019, even better, with some cool flights and air show visits and all that fun stuff. And then it takes us to the fall of 2019, right after the Sioux Falls Air Show, Power on the Prairie of that year, which was a fun air show, and I enjoyed visiting it and making all the content that I did with the different performers, and that's when I did do daily videos, so that was kind of the experiment with that video schedule. And then move into Christmas and all that, and, everything just seemed pretty normal, and I thought, 2020 was just going to be the same, and I'm certainly excited to see what the future had. And this is when I got my Sony camcorder, the AX53. So now I've had that thing for over 5 years at this point, which, still kicking along, but I have started to think about a replacement for it in the event that it breaks down. I hope it doesn't, but just for the sake of, being prepared, it's a good time for me to start thinking about a camera replacement and all that. And when I got the camcorder, I decided to start a new airport series, and that would be Skippytown Regional Airport. And yes. I know Connor had the first one on there. You see the second one on the right. And that was when I finally started to get some sort of regular upload in there. And this one was only like a monthly thing since I did it on, I think, the last Friday of the month. That was the, that was the schedule that I had set up. But with the new camera, I took it out for plane spotting, so you saw those videos on there. That was certainly fun to do. And then, a couple unboxings came into play. And that takes us to the Minneapolis plane spotting. If you don't mind scrolling back down just a little bit there, just another row. There we go. So there's all the Minneapolis plane spotting. And this was in mid-February, so this would have been about 3 to 4 weeks before COVID hit. And by this point, that's when we were all starting to learn about the virus spreading around, and it was just starting to arrive into the United States as well.
The pandemic.
Yeah, I started to get a little anxious too. Is this going to change how we run things? And my parents were like, well, we don't know. We're just kind of following along. But nevertheless, we carried on with the MSP trip. My father and I did that together, and my mom, I remember she was kind of against me doing that because, you have this virus, we don't know where it's at yet, and there's a risk that I could get it. And thankfully I didn't from that, just to make it clear, but the concern I think was justified in that regard. So we did that trip. That was fun. Put together all the videos, and then that's when I ran into Connor as well. He started up the Discord server at about that same time, and that's when we started talking more often, and we had a lot of fun in that server. And that's when March 13th came. March 13th, 2020, a Friday, and this is kind of a little personal story time here, but basically what happened was I got to lunch at school that day. I got to the table that I was sitting at, and one of the seatmates that I had, he came out of the lunch line and said, "Hey, school's being closed for the next couple weeks." And I'm like, "What? Are you serious?" And I pull up my phone, I check Twitter, and I was able to confirm that. So I text my mom as well, and she's shocked at it too. And everyone was starting to do it at that point. And I remember too because I'm a big fan of NASCAR, and they had also said that they were going to hold the races still, but behind closed doors, meaning that they were not going to allow any fans in attendance. But then when the NBA announced a postponement of their season, NASCAR and pretty much everyone else complied with that, and we didn't have any sporting events for at least the foreseeable future. And then March Madness got canceled as well, so that was the first time ever that tournament got called off. So with everything now being shut down for, what we initially thought was short term, but eventually became more indefinite, I was at home, and now this is a time to make some videos and just have some fun stuff. And Massive Unboxing number 4, that was the video that I uploaded on that day. I think it's on the row below, too, real quick, if you want to scroll back down. Yeah. So there's Massive Unboxing number 4. That was the one, the video that I uploaded to kind of signal in the start of a new era, because, things were changing. Everything was just we were witnessing history, whether we liked it or not, because this is going to be very much life-changing, game-changing, everything changing. And I also started the Sioux Falls Regional Airport, the first time that anyone had a regular series on this airport, because, it's a very small airport, so no one really gets to do it all that much. But I remember Aviation TUS, he made a model airport not long before I started it. And, I was like, hey, you did that right before I started mine, but he only did it as a one-off, whereas I, of course, had major ambitions to keep it going as a monthly series. So that was the goal moving forward, and of course having Skippy Town alongside it. So now I've got 2 regular series going. And you also see that dual helicopter flyover. I remember Sioux Falls had an event where they were encouraging residents to put lights out in their front yard or backyard, light them up, and then they were going to fly helicopters all across the city at that night. And we had a broken heart because our lights didn't work, and it was kind of ironic in a way because, this was such a negative event, and, with COVID and all that, it was such a fascinating time with that. But at any rate, we continued on, and the unboxings, the release reactions, of course, you see that NG April 2020, that was when my opinion on NG really started to become more positive than ever before, and then Gemini Jets, that really started to shoot down into the gutter, unfortunately. But yeah, we continue on. You want to keep scrolling up too.
Yes.
A lot more fun videos coming up here. There's a T-38. The KC-135 surprise. Let's talk a little bit about that.
No, we need to talk quite a bit about that.
Yeah, that one was certainly a memory. So I vividly remember this. I was working on some stuff for some of my classes, and I heard this jet flying over my house. So I grab my camera, I run outside, and I wait for a few minutes. And the thing circles back. It's a KC-135. So, I start, it's like, oh my God, there it is. So I'm running around the front yard, and I think there were some people walking by our house as well, and they were like, what's going on? And then they look up, they see this jet, and they're like, oh, yeah, that's right. So that garnered quite a few views and has been been a long-term reference between myself and Connor and the rest of our group. That's certainly been a staple of our references over the last 5 years. That certainly has been a huge aspect of what we love to go back to and talk about from time to time. But yeah, you have the KC-135. There's a Sun Country and Southwest unboxings. I remember being very much excited for that. Let me see. And then there's the 114th Fighter Wing takeoff. They did an event as well where they flew across the state to
Another
celebrate
crazy reaction.
Yep, and that one was even more insane, the KC-135, because I think initially I had a belief it was a fifth F-16, but I think it was one of them that circled around and then came back for a low pass, and he had the he had the freaking afterburner on and everything, and my father said that his ears even hurt when it flew right by him at his position because he was up down.
It's loud on the video. It's loud.
Loud, and the camera even shakes too because I was like, oh my God. And of course, some choice words were used, and you can certainly refer to that video to figure out what they were. But at any rate, time continues passing on, and there was also another important video I want to mention, scrolling back down a little bit, a couple rows. That one right there, the American A320 unboxing, when I got it with a missing set of nose wheels. Now, I remember this because, if I remember right, I was doing a final exam for one of my classes that morning, and the model came in the mail, and then unboxed it, and then I got really upset when I realized that the nose wheels were gone. Like, they were nowhere in the box, nowhere to be found. I think I remember throwing down the cradle on my floor in frustration because I was that upset. I was that you-know-what. And I posted that video, certainly garnered a lot of attention. You see that view count on there as well, and the multiplier with the stats application you have on your thing, Connor.
Yes.
That did garner a lot of views, and I remember we talked about that for quite a while after, and especially like right before the Gemini jets, those releases were, at that time I didn't like them, but looking back on them, I think they were okay, but obviously my standards at the time were not, they're not the way that they are today. So that's why my opinion on that release was definitely very negative. But nonetheless, I have a couple models from that set now, like that Alaska Ember 175 honoring those who serve, and the Northwest A320 bowling shoe. That was certainly an interest as well. But, that was during a time when they couldn't get to the factory and all that, and they had minimal communication because everything was still shut down over there and back here in the U.S. So, you didn't have that planning that you could do to get all these releases done, all the good stuff out. So they just had to do whatever they could easily make right away, and those were the things that they could do. But eventually, the temperature starts to warm up, and, at least in my neck of the woods, we reopened things rather quickly. We're in a part of the country where we didn't really have as many restrictions as other areas did, so we were back to normal within a couple months, or at least some resemblance of normalcy. But there you see, and we even had an inaugural flight during this time, Allegiant from San Diego to Sioux Falls. Excuse me, I think we had Winter the Dolphin fly that route on that first day. So I remember going out to the airport and catching that. First time I've ever caught an inaugural of any kind. So that was fun to catch. Yep. And, random model airports as well. That had also started. I did Stillwater, and Connor didn't believe that I was going to do that initially. But
yes.
I did it. And I also started Duluth as well, and there's Des Moines. That's another airport that came into play. But yeah, we just kind of continued on with the different videos, plane spotting, model aircraft unboxings, release reactions, Skippy Town, Sioux Falls, Des Moines. We just kept doing what we did, and the channel continued to grow a little more day by day, and B-17 also visited here, so I got to tour that. That was fun, with all the COVID restrictions in place, of course. And there is a WC-135C, that Constant Phoenix. That was another great reaction that I had, with some interesting feedback this time, but, it was interesting. But if you don't know what that Constant Phoenix aircraft is, by the way, that is basically like a weather sniffer. It it just looks in the atmosphere for any like signs of like nuclear radiation. And thankfully, there isn't around here. I imagine it was up in Sioux Falls for just some training flights and all that. So either way, cool to see. But they've retired that aircraft type and it's been replaced with the newer R variant, which has the upgraded engines on it. So that takes us to the end of the summer and into my junior year of high school, taking an aviation class on different campus as well. And right during that first week, I remember that United 777, that military charter that came into Sioux Falls, that was cool. And then, obviously, school resumed and everything. That Gemini Jet September 2020 releases, I remember that as a special report when they released that message about waffle collectibles and unauthorized retailers. They obviously got a lot of complaints that they were not shipping out models properly, they were coming in broken, that kind of stuff. And I'm sure you remember that too with, all the broken models from Gemini Jets. That was certainly a hot topic during this time.
Yes.
You want to explain that a little bit from your perspective?
Yeah, no, I certainly was on the front end of... It was frustrating, right? They were capable of doing so much better, and I think everybody would agree with that. But this was year number 5. I mean, we had issues dating back to 2016. Like, it was time for it to improve. Unfortunately, I think NG and other companies gave them the pressure they needed for that to happen. But, when I'm out here spending at that time $40 on an aircraft, I don't want detached wings and the same heavies and, special liveries that people are not quite as practical as standard liveries, along with, just the dumbfounding aspect of, there's so much capability here. And obviously we saw them change that. Like the 777 mold was not the greatest, and that improved. Same for some of the other wide bodies like the Boeing 787. So my frustration came from the perspective of what they're capable of, and they're obviously now doing what they're capable of, so there's no reason for frustration. But they were so capable of doing better, and they've certainly proved that over the last several years. But at this time, it was so frustrating to see them not even get close to their capabilities, and that's why we are where we are now.
Absolutely. The feedback and the criticism they all got from across the community certainly made them change as well. And of course, as you said, the pressure from NG and all the other manufacturers to improve their releases, improve their quality, just make them better as a company. And they have certainly done that in the last 5 years. But with that coming to change eventually, I eventually reached 10 airport updates for Skippy Town. There you see it, September 2020 in the top right.
Yes.
That was a big milestone, the first time I'd reached double digits, and that definitely became a big point where, I can do this consistently. This is something that I can keep on doing, even with school fully back in action. There's even a time period where I had to stay home for a couple weeks because I was in close contact with someone who got COVID.
Oh.
I vividly remember that. And I was scared that I was going to... that's all right. I was scared I was going to get COVID, but thankfully I didn't. I mean, I was wearing my mask, so that obviously helped, but, I never figured out who it was to this day. They never tell you that for privacy reasons, which I totally understand. But during the same time as well, that's when I hit 1,000 subscribers. So there you see the music video I did, the Mega Model Airport update, and the big plane spotting episode, the 60th one. So great that I timed that up perfectly.
Yes.
NG Gemini Jets release videos. You see the new style for the thumbnails and all the new text that I introduced, which I kept to this day, which was coincidentally changed around the same time you changed yours.
Yeah.
From the thinner font to the more thicker Gotham font that you
That's
use.
correct.
My font that I use, if you're ever curious about that, it's Berlin Sans FB Demi, I think is the full name. Let me pull it up in Adobe real quick just to verify, but I know it's like Berlin Sans something. Yeah, Berlin Sans FB Demi. That's the font that I use in my videos as of today. And I was still using the Gluckester font as well at the time, but my focus now was more or less turning towards the Berlin font since it looked much nicer than the other one. So that takes us to the end of 2020, and from this point I'll speed up a little bit because I did talk quite a bit there throughout this whole year, but there you see the last plane spotting episode for the year in review, that Christmas unboxing, all that fun stuff. So yeah, that takes us into 2021, and if you just kind of want to slowly scroll through all the videos, there's another MSP trip. That one occurred a little earlier in the year. Retro reviews, I debuted that as well, and then the My Collection series, that became a semi-regular staple. It wasn't really monthly. There's times where it was, and other times it wasn't. Then eventually I introduced actual titles to the airport update episodes. That came into big play. There's the April 2021 releases. I know we talked about the March releases on your channel. I'll talk about the April one. I remember I was in my English class that day, and earlier I told my father to text me a code word if Gemini Jets had released anything that I sent him like a list of model airplanes that I wanted to see them make. And I told him to text me that code word if one of them was on there. So he did, and I'm like, oh crap. And there's a seatmate of mine that asked me about it. His name's Johnny. And he asked me about it, and I tell him, and he's like, oh shoot. But yeah, so I get home, I see the American Eagle CRJ 900, and I'm like, yes, that's finally come to fruition. So now I finally can say that I have both the Delta and American CR9s, the latter of which had never been done before, and just super happy about that. And there's that some assembly required. I vividly remember that one because I bought that as a scratch and dent, but, way more damage than I thought it would have been, probably from shipping and all that, but, what can you do? So we'll continue scrolling through, just slowly but surely making our way through the rest of the spring of 2021. Massive Unboxing 8, I vividly remember that one, the different orders I had, and DG Pilot for getting a couple models and giving me some free ones as compensation. And then we move into that summer. We talked a little bit about it on your channel, Connor, with your illness throughout that entire period, which I vividly remember. But thankfully you got over that after that period.
Very much.
Some auto racing content. Yep, some auto racing content comes into play as well. You see a couple, sprint cars, dirt modifieds, and all that fun stuff. Because as I hinted at earlier, I'm a big NASCAR guy, so I like any other form of auto stock car racing and all that. Have not returned to the Speedway since, though I'd love to go back. Just maybe make another video or two at some point. And then there's a B-29 Fifi. I vividly remember that. Air Power History Tour coming into town. I flew on the Stinson L5 as well. That was like a 15, 20-minute flight. Really fun. And this is still at a time where I really wanted to become an airline pilot. But right at about this point, then that's when I decided to switch my career aspirations. And I don't really like to talk about it here because it doesn't really relate to aviation. It's down a completely different field. But nevertheless, I was still going to remain passionate for aviation, just as strong as it had ever been. And arguably, it's even stronger now than what it was back then, because now I've learned so much more about it just all throughout. And now we're in October, November 21, so, just kind of going through the rounds of the normal content still and just having a lot of fun making these videos and seeing Gemini Jets improve their release choices, so my reception towards them becoming a lot more positive. I just want to keep on scrolling up a little bit too. Through the rest of 2021, some charter visits, everything else, just a lot of fun going on, and then eventually into 2022. And a little further up, there's the Gemini Jets year in review video. That one had quite the positive reception, so now making that a regular series moving forward. And I was really happy with how the 2024 review came out and the 2023 one as well. So expect to see one for 2025 here at the end of the year. And then the spring of 22, getting close to ending my high school career. And Connor, you were obviously in that position as well.
Yes.
So big changes all along the way for the both of us, but still making YouTube videos and just kind of starting to think about what are we going to do when we graduate and go to college? Are we going to get time to come home still and make videos, or are we going to have to change some aspects, that kind of stuff? But what certainly didn't change was the type of content. Oh, excuse me. And Connor viciously circling the foolish update video for Des Moines International Airport when we had a bit of fun. We swapped intros. We made the airport update look as goofy as possible. Just everything going on.
I think I even tilted a 320 my update on its horizontal stabilizer. That was crazy.
Yep, you did. Pointed up like a rocket ship. I don't know how that thing didn't tip over. I imagine, there was some anxiety in your viewers that it was going to fall over and break.
Stay tuned. More to come.
Yep. But at any rate, there you see the North Central DC-9, the first part of Herman's Odyssey, officially starting there. Documentary on that coming out May 15th, 2025, so stay tuned for that, and that's going to be a very fun video. And it could be more if Gemini Jets or Aero Classics releases a North Central plane. Please do, because I'd like to make it an even 10. But yeah, and there you see Retro Reviews coming back as well. That comes back for a second stint here in the spring of 22. And that takes us to me graduating from high school. And I remember this period as well because we had a couple big storms roll through Sioux Falls. We had that big derecho and the Haboob, which is like a big dust storm essentially. And that knocked out power for me for that entire night after the storm hit. And then during my high school graduation, it was like not even 12 hours after it had taken place, we had a tornado hit Sioux Falls. And thankfully, that one wasn't really as destructive as the derecho was, but those are moments that do stick with me, just because of the significance. And for me, I love weather. I like following the weather, and especially when severe weather strikes, then that's when I'm closely following it, and especially too if it is around my area, because I don't like tornadoes. I don't like the big storms, especially when they're late at night. That's not my type of rodeo. I will not do that. And especially when a storm hits at night and you've got the lightning and thunder going on outside, I don't like it. I get very scared of the dark, and especially when you got a storm going on. And I still remember that tornado because that hit at about 2 a.m, and it knocked out power for us. And my family and I, we just kind of scrambled around, just making sure we didn't have anything damaged, because the electricity was freaking out in all sorts of wacky ways. I hadn't seen it act like that before. It was crazy. And I think I even told you about that too, Connor, that following morning, if I remember correctly.
It was insane.
I definitely told you.
Yes, we talked about it extensively.
Yep, and I especially remember the derecho. We were on the call when that happened, when it first hit, and we were assessing the all the damage and everything. Certainly a fun time. But yeah, May 2022, that was certainly a memorable month. And then that takes us up to June. And eventually, and there you see Omni Air 777, nice little bonus. That takes us to Airliners International. And that's kind of where we'll cap off our chronological timeline, if you will. And now this is kind of where I'll talk a little bit about Airliners International and just how it really all culminates into the climax for this video, because we go from talking about COVID and its effects to the shifting of the content I was producing on YouTube and the scheduling and everything, and to eventually Airliners International. So some background as to how I found this show, or found out about it. It was during the summer of 2021, and the show was in Phoenix that year. That was supposed to be the 2020 show, but obviously that didn't happen that year. So it got moved back a whole year. It was still in Phoenix. And there's another friend of ours that went to it, and they posted about it in a group chat. And it looked pretty fascinating to me, so I looked into it, and I'm like, okay, this looks fun. Where's it going to be at next year? And I find out that it's going to be in Chicago next June of 22. So I look into it, and eventually I'm able to get registered, get a hotel booked and all that. And that was a lot of fun, that anticipation of, am I going to go or not? And eventually figuring out that, yes, I can. That was fun. And of course, I told Connor about it as well, and he was just as enthralled by it as I was. And there was a period of uncertainty as well. I remember you didn't know for sure if you were going to go until like a month before, if I remember right.
Yes, correct. It was May when I figured that out.
Yep. So, but thankfully when I got that news that you were going to be able to go, that was, the rest is history. So we finally met up there. That was the first time I'd ever met anyone in the aviation community online, at least in this group, and we had a lot of fun. We enjoyed the show so much, and we looked into the 2023 show. That one would be in Dallas. We both went to that, brought a lot more of our friends and viewers with, and Kansas City was the same, and Atlanta's going to be the same. And yeah, Airliners International, that's kind of that's the next big turning point in my life for me, because that was kind of when I finally realized that I have a place that I belong in, because when I was in school, I didn't have a whole lot of friends, and that was just mainly because I was such a big airplane nerd in school. That's like the only thing I would talk about half the time. And not a whole lot, like barely anyone could connect to that because no one knew airplanes as much as I did. So they kind of distanced themselves from me. And, I was just kind of there. And eventually, once I started doing YouTube, then that's when I connected with all these individuals who shared those common interests in airplanes and whatnot, and eventually finding people that share similar interests in other topics that I'm into with sports and all that. Obviously, Connor, you follow a lot of sports as well, like I do.
Yes.
And we've connected on that so many times. And that's what's built up our friendship. And when we were able to go to airliners and meet up for the first time, then that was a big turning point in my life. That's when I finally realized that I have the friends that I have desired for my entire life, because in school I didn't really have those friends, and I moved around a few times even, so I wasn't really in one place for all 12 years of my grade school education. But just being in this community and having all these connections and knowing all these people and having this much fun with them, that's what made me realize that I have a place to belong in. And I'm just so fortunate to be a part of this, and especially to know you and other people like Anderson and all that, and the fun that we've had together, and even for you two as well. It's been amazing, and I don't know where I would be without everything that had happened. And it's kind of weird to say too, but I don't know where I would be if COVID didn't happen.
That's the point of the video, yes.
Yeah, and it's like, it's crazy. You look back on this and you just see the progress in you, and you see everything that has changed. The world has changed around you. You yourself are changing, and just everything that's all happening at once. It's just, it's hard to put into words. I know you feel that same way too. You can't verbally describe it. It is impossible to do because of how many things happened all at once, and just the way that everything changed so suddenly. And with all the new things that have been introduced into our lives, and the fact that we're so connected now in so many aspects, it's hard just to put it into words, or even to put it into a video where it is of, a reasonable length. I mean, I've already gone 32 minutes with this thing because I tell stories in just a way that I can go in depth and just fill that time span, and if not go longer. And
love it.
But yeah, going back to the aspect of COVID and us meeting for the first time online, and then moving on to airliners and us going there, meeting in person for the first time, and that enabling me to do so many fun things. And fast forward to 2024, when we both met up at Kansas City. You had done that big Europe trip, and you went to go visit Anderson right before you guys came to Kansas City. That was incredible, and just getting to meet the both of you there, that was phenomenal. And especially when we did our Minneapolis event as well right after, coming back to Sioux Falls with me, and your first time in the area, and just seeing how the ship is run around here. And it's certainly a fun one, and I'm really glad that we got to do that. And then eventually the Florida excursion a few months later, and that was the first time, that was genuinely the first time that I had so much fun with friends, like actual fun. That Minneapolis trip was kind of like an appetizer in a way, but that Florida excursion was just the true climax of this whole ordeal, from humble beginnings to where we're at now. It's amazing. I don't know how else to describe it. It is incredible, and just, it's so much fun to look back on, just how the evolution of this YouTube page and everything. It's amazing. I've been doing this for 8 years now, and I hope to do it for many more to come. But that's kind of the story with, looking back at COVID and how it's all, the evolution of it and everything ever since then. It's a lot to take in, and, I know you're certainly the same way, and if you have any other supplemental thoughts, you can certainly put them in here, and I'd be eager to hear your perspective on kind of my journey from when COVID started to up to today, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so crazy to see it all come together. I really don't even know what words I could come up with to go with what you said because of how well you did covering it, but I think it goes back to do what you love and love what you do. That obviously, whether it was, at the end of 2019 with normal Skippy Town, or now with AI 2025, or somewhere in between with plane spotting fighter jets, it's just so cool to see it all come together. It's fun, it's epic, and it's going to be crazy to see what happens next, but I'm certainly super excited for it, and there's going to be no shortage of opportunities. So we'll definitely have to do even more comprehensive thoughts at some point in some sort of video, but big stepping stones, and it certainly impacted our lives so well. So I'm so glad that we were able to make the most of what could have been a really bad situation. Obviously, that puts us to where we are today.
It definitely does. Just making the most out of that situation, it has shaped us into who we are. And, as I've said already, what would I be doing without, doing YouTube so frequently, multiple uploads a week now, and knowing Connor and all these other people? I don't know what I would be doing with myself. I don't know if I'm off in some other aspect, or, doing stupid things. I mean, college kids, they do a lot of crazy stuff, and I'm certainly not in that group, and you're the same as well, Connor. But
yeah. If
I didn't know you, I would be afraid of what I could be doing at that point. So I'm glad that, I am the way that I am, and I don't do all this dangerous stuff, and instead I do YouTube, watch airplanes, follow sports, and just have fun with everyone. That's just kind of who I am, and I'm really glad that it all turned out this way. Just be happy for what you have, rather than be upset for what you don't. That's kind of the motto that I live by, especially with die-cast model airplanes, but it's very much applicable to life in general. Just be grateful for what you have, because you don't know how others are off. Are they worse than you? And if they are, how bad is it? You just can't tell. There's no way to tell just by judging the cover of the book. There's a lot more to a story than what is shown on the surface, or what maybe they would say to you. There's a lot to it, and that's why I'm so fortunate to be in this position that I am, making YouTube and enjoying it, and doing what I love most in other fields, and just having that fun all throughout, and showing people that I do this. It still draws some weird eyes at times, but they definitely find it more fascinating now than what maybe some of the classmates I knew in middle school would have viewed it as, because they just did all kinds of crazy things. I remember too, they would mock me. They'd be like, special edition, when I did like the plane spotting special edition in Omaha. Did a couple of those as well, and they kept mocking that, and it's crazy. And another interesting story too. There was a teacher helper in one of my classes, and when I tried telling her that, I don't like what these kids are doing, I want them to stop. And I vividly remember this statement, but she said, well, then quit doing YouTube if you don't want these kids making fun of you. And it's like, huh? That completely goes against what I want to do. I want to keep making YouTube, even if these kids are making fun of me. And nevertheless, I obviously went against her advice, and to this day, here I am. And that just goes back to what I said earlier. What would I be doing without everything that had happened? Even with that, it could be so much different if I'd taken her advice and just stopped doing YouTube, just so I wouldn't have these kids making fun of me. And that's another important life lesson too. If you're doing YouTube, you're starting out, and you've got kids at school making fun of you, just ignore them. Keep doing what you're doing. They're jealous of what you're doing. They're jealous of your success online. And even if it is small compared to what other people might be doing, it'll grow eventually. You just have to be persistent, trust the process, do what you love and love what you do, and make the videos that you enjoy the most, and naturally you're going to find that audience that will connect with it. And that is exactly what I've done in the 8+ years that I've been doing YouTube. And it's crazy to think I've been doing this for 8 years. 8 years! I'm now essentially a veteran. You and I are like veterans of the community now, compared to some of the previous guys.
We made it.
And that's a topic for another time too.
Yeah,
we certainly
absolutely.
need to explore
we will
that.
make a video on that.
That will be fun to explore in the near future. But that's really all I've got. I mean, this is just a big comprehensive assessment, and it went well beyond just the aspect of how COVID changed everything, and more into just a general assessment of how everything has evolved with my YouTube page from the start to where it is now, and just how everything fell into place to make me the way that I am and the way that my YouTube channel is. It's just incredible to look back on, and it's hard to put into words, and, I just don't know where I would be. But at this point, that will do it for this video today. Connor, thank you so much for joining me and just kind of talking it out with me about my journey and, just hearing out everything that I had to say. And if there's anything else you'd like to add, please take a moment to speak your thoughts, and we'll call it a video.
Yeah, I can't agree more with what you said. It's such an eye-opening and inspiring opportunity being 5 years into this whole deal on the COVID aspect. And obviously now we're moving forward with our respective lives, and we're both going to be graduating college soon and have such an interesting career ahead. And, obviously our channels will be impacted coinciding with that, but it's certainly really exciting to see what it's going to be next. I know we're both not going to go anywhere and continue to make this community what it is, so I'm certainly extremely excited for the future, but there'll be much more reflecting going back, and you use so many good examples of what ifs, and all the what ifs went in such a great direction here, and it's so exciting to think about that, and that definitely will be eye-opening and inspiring for so many people. So it turned out super well. You did a great job iterating it all, and we'll have to reflect on it for such a long time to come.
Absolutely. So with that being said, that is the end of the video. Thanks so much for watching and listening, however you may have consumed this video, and I will catch you in the next video.